Great, welcome everyone who is listening to this live or maybe coming in later to find out some great information. This panel is just to discuss what we're calling staying agile in 2020. My name is Natalie Kimball, and we have an incredible group of 3 individuals that I will introduce to you shortly. But we have to make sure at the beginning of every webinar, HEDNA event, that we do mention the code of conduct. So you can see it on hedna.org. Essentially, we have to be very careful about what we say here. We're not talking about anything that is confidential, anything related to margins, or anything related to pricing. So as we go through this, we just want to make sure that everybody is very aware of the HEDNA code of conduct. So what we did is we really wanted to get this together. Myself and Sandra Sari from Hyatt, we are the co-chairs of the Education Committee. So we have wanted to put together a webinar to really talk to the individuals who are behind the graphs that we have been seeing. So as we know, there's no need to talk about the very dramatic events that have taken place across the globe. It has incredibly impacted our industry. We are all very aware, especially as we all love hospitality. But really what we want to talk about is we've seen the graphs, they go down, they're starting to come back up. But what does that mean to the people that are actually trying to generate this business and get folks back into the hospitality segment? So absolutely thrilled to have with us today Gianna Rivera. She's the GVP of Distribution and Connectivity with Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. We also have Tim Hughes, who is the VP of Corporate Development from Agoda, which incorporates the Priceline Partner Services. And Mark Redmond, who's the head of global chains for Hotelbeds, which is a global bed bank servicing, which we'll get into a little bit more, but I think is one of the ones that we really all need to be considered of. So really what we want to do is kind of say, how do we get an OTA, a global hotelier, and a wholesaler, and kind of say, you know, what's the status of the business as it is today? So we're going to go ahead and start. I'm going to give some slightly ominous things that we've seen going on, and then we're going to talk about how we can all be positive and move this forward. So, you know, we've seen that, you know, we've known that RVing, vacation rentals, those are going up. People are staying more local. They're getting out and doing nature, more kind of outdoor activities. We know that campgrounds have sold out pretty significantly across the world. So we've seen that go up. But on the flip side of that, we also hear Hawaii is going to be shutting down. We know overall that airline occupancy, capacity, is down almost 73%. So we know that things are a little on paper, they look far more negative, but really we want to talk to the panel and see, you know, what are the things that we can actually take from that information. So Gianna, I want to start with you and ask you, you know, what's something that Wyndham was not doing in the past, but as a result of the current times, you have adapted into your everyday, or something that maybe you're going to start to involve, or a strategy that you're going to work on moving forward?
Sure. First, thanks for having me join the webinar today. That's really, you know, nice. So thank you very much. I would say that a couple of things that, well, for sure, I think everybody is in the same position. One of the things that we've had to do, that everybody else is doing as well, is have the entire company work remote, you know, and that in itself brings a whole bunch of challenges that we've just had to overcome and find different ways of just doing business, you know, everyday business. So that has been a great challenge, I'm sure, that others can share the same sentiment. And from a hotel property perspective, I think that, you know, the hotels have had to understand what is the need of the community. Some hotels have had to convert either their entire property or part of their properties into, you know, outreaches for homeless, right? The communities have had huge issues with, you know, keeping distance between, you know, the homeless in their particular establishments, and they just don't have enough room. So having to, you know, be part of that, not only is it the humane thing to do and the compassionate thing to do, but it also undertakes a lot of different things that a hotel property needs to do to be able to accommodate those things, and us as a company providing the support that they need to be able to make those changes and pivot their way of doing business not to mention first responders, you know, accommodating their needs and making sure that we're available to do that. And even things like, you know, converting some hotels to dormitories for universities as the need has also arisen for that. So there has been a lot of changes very quickly that as a company we've had to absorb and also you know, come up with solutions and provide options and support for the hotels to be able to keep their doors open, the ones that can or are unable to, and can continue to provide services for guests, whether they are their traditional leisure guests or different.
That's great, Tim. I think that keeps, maybe you think that was a setup, but that speaks to what we want to talk about, was being agile. That proves the fact that when as a community we have to pivot, we do so. And it's interesting that you brought up the remote piece of it. I think that's something that, especially as hoteliers, we're very hands-on, and we kind of forget that component. So Tim, maybe I'll switch to you and kind of ask you the same question. A little bit more kind of what was Agoda probably not looking at in the horizon, in the future, but now is part of your daily norm?
I mean, we're all going to look back one day on April 2020 and just shake our heads that we got through it. I mean, what an experience for an industry, what an experience for the people, you know, confronted with that industry. Our customer call center, I'm sure everyone was the same. Our customer call center was in a load of calls we never imagined, never conceived of as even possible. And having to confront that, having to confront the emotions on the other side, travelers, you know, stranded, worried, panicked. And on the other side, hoteliers, stranded, worried, panicked. And so we always thought ourselves an agile company. We literally, our development systems are called Agile, but we had to go from Agile to Agile times 10. We had to be prepared to do things at a speed that we didn't think possible. And I'll give you an example. We had to find a way, we're like everybody, we have a self-service system, which obviously is much faster than calling us. But our self-service system for non-refundables said, tough luck customer, it's non-refundable. So, right, you know, like all non-refundable systems did. So we had to get into that, like, as soon as we knew what was going on, and change that messaging and tell people, no, please, you can come to this self-service environment, you can register that you are in trouble or can't get there or the world's gone to hell, and we'll deal with it. We promise you we'll deal with it. Trust us. But don't call. Please don't call. We've got it. We've got your message and we're going to deal with it. And so we had to move very, very quickly to do that. We had to maintain, you know, the sense of humanity and care that was going on in the environment. So I think the thing we just had to do was just figure out, like, agile turned into speed. And then our product planning and our strategizing moved from quarters and years to days and weeks and hours. You know, what do we need to do this hour, this week, this day? I think we knew, we suspected, we thought that when the recovery did come, it would come domestic. We'd seen that before. We saw that after 9/11. We saw that after SARS. We saw that after MERS. So we thought, okay, we've got to get a product slate together that's going to support domestic, and we've got to get ahead of that. So we've got one sort of side of the product group just frantically trying to keep up with the customer care issues. We've got another side saying, right, let's not miss what happens when a little bit of it comes back. So let's get out there and, you know, again, measuring in days and weeks, let's get some products ready that can support domestic when it comes back. So yeah, I think it was agile to the power of 10. It was finding a speed we didn't know we had.
That's great. And then I think to that point too, Mark, I mean, given your segment is quite different, and they probably the advanced booking windows, and you know, how has Hotelbeds been able to shift a little bit and do things that you really hadn't anticipated doing in the past?
Yeah, again, just to start, thank you for the opportunity for inviting me to be here. You know, it's great. Similar to some of the things Gianna and Tim had said, you know, operationally being really, really stretched. I mean, it was incredible. There was decisions being made literally within an hour or two with lockdowns, and our operations team, the speed that they shown, literally working 24/7 was incredible. But it was really difficult. It was always just with the trying to get the information to the customer and you know, to the client, to the customer, and be mindful that people are in transit or about to be in transit. And you know, it was really, really difficult, but the team, and I think, you know, across the industry, people have just reacted so well, you know, to try and come together with all of this, and I think we'll have to continue with that, because it's not going anywhere. But you know, we're very much an international player, and then suddenly having to become we had domestic business, but it wasn't our strength per se, and suddenly had to change overnight. We were always focused on, long lead times and long lengths of stay and driving that international business, and then suddenly it all changed overnight. But thankfully, I think we figured it out quite quickly, and we're doing quite well now from a domestic perspective. So as tough as everything is, there is business out there, and we're starting to see those green shoots, and week on week there's a general upward trend, and that's encouraging to see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in we as an industry, I think maybe internally and externally, we have a reputation for moving pretty slow. So we can all admit that, right? we tend to plan and overplan and then decide and maybe pivot back. And maybe this has been a great experience for us to kind of say, let's make a decision, let's move forward, let's get all the resources aligned and get things done. Because there's no lack of wanting to help our customers, which brings us to kind of the next thing. And I know, Tim, you talked a little bit about your customer impact. So really what I think we'd love to know that would be really helpful for the community is to let us know what changes you've made that really help to address your customer feedback. So you had already mentioned that, going to the portal and making sure that was up to date and speed, but what can maybe can the HEDNA community learn from other feedback you receive from customers that you've implemented?
So what was interesting is we had a bunch of parallel but very different stories going on. So the story coming in and out of China, Korea, and Taiwan was very different to the story coming out of America. It was very different to the story coming out of Australia, because each of them was in different phases of this virus. So, Taiwan, Korea, and China had a sort of a first in, first out thing going in. They're amongst the first people to get it. So as early as June, we started to see them coming out of it and started to see them exploding into domestic travel, just desperate to get out of their homes and get away from the lockdown. And so very quickly, we had to turn our attention, North Asian, and just go, right, what's going on in Taiwan and Korea? And then we had different things going on in, across Europe. At that stage was still locked down, but then Europe started to come back with a sort of a European travel burst. And then America has sustained quite a fair bit of travel of late. So we had a whole bunch of things that we had to look at, but some very common elements came out of it. And Mark touched on them as well. Common element number one was, and aside from domestic, we all know it's domestic, common element number one was the lead time shrunk dramatically. Same day bookings exploded. And so we had to make sure that hoteliers were ready to take bookings at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and that they'd manage their rates and availability. If they were used to 2-week lead times, that they'd suddenly got their pricing in order for Friday morning for people coming up for Friday evening. We also had to re-educate, or that's a bit unfair, we had to remove the non-refundable from the lexicon. We branded our project called Easy Cancel. I'm sure others have given them different names. We basically had to say to the market, look, we are sorry, but you're going to have to be as flexible as possible. And what was interesting in that is within 2 months, our cancellation rates were back to quote unquote normal levels, but our levels of non-refundable sales were almost near zero. So consumers, because they were booking on such a short lead time, were actually turning up. They just needed to know they had that flexibility. So we had the lead time shrinking. We had to educate people on non-refundables, and then we had to realize how local this domestic was going to be, because this was not domestic, New York to Hawaii or Sydney to Perth. It wasn't that domestic. It was 150 miles. It was the most domestic could be. It was the drive market, the train market, the bus market. So we launched a program called Go Local, and we've allowed 150-mile designation discounts. So we said that if you're a hotelier, we can do 150-mile designation discounts. So you really are just discounting for the people in that neighborhood, in that drive market. Because we knew that that's where people were going to be going first, and we wanted to make sure the hoteliers could protect themselves around that. So lots of elements in that, but we had to spend time quickly with our partners and quickly with our tech to cope with lead times, to cope with that flexibility needed, to cope with the localest of local in domestic we've ever seen.
That's great. And I think, Gianna, to that point, your customers are a little bit more, I think, twofold in the fact that you've got an expensive network of almost 9,000 hotels, give or take. And then you've got, the actual customer checking in on property. So, are there, between those two customer groups, Has there been anything maybe based on like a local drive market? Have parking lots been more full? Is there anything that kind of from the customer of either hotel or a guest that you've seen any changes to?
For sure. Definitely a lot of our hotels are in that segmentation, if you will. So there's a lot of our customers that arrive by, driving trains and not necessarily airplanes. So we don't have that dependency, which has turned out to be, better for us than, others probably. However, what's been very different is the types of attributes and the types of amenities that customers are looking for, right? So to Tim's point earlier, we have had to come up with a way to really stay connected to, these 9,000 plus hotels almost on a day-to-day basis. And our operations team has just gone crazy trying to understand, what are the differences, right? Are you offering, takeaway breakfast? Is the breakfast completely removed? Is the pool open? Is it closed? And these are the kinds of questions, in addition to the now more traditional safety measures that people are looking for in terms of distancings and things like that. They want to know, if I come to stay at your hotel, am I going to have a restaurant to eat? Is it going to be in your premise? Is it going to be nearby? How far are you from the park? Because that's the activity that I want to do. The questions are a little bit different. And so the challenge for us has been, and I'm sure that this is shared across, some of our competitors, is to make sure that this data is fresh and it's dynamic, and we can get it to the consumers so we can get them to reassure them to come stay with us, and get to use the amenities that they're looking for, or the attributes that they're looking for. So that's been quite a big change that we've seen since the pandemic, for sure.
But it's, I think as an industry, again, this isn't to call out all of our pitfalls, but maybe to look at opportunities. We know that content has, for many, many years, been a bit of a struggle. And I think this puts an even bigger lens on the fact that you want to be able to, on the fly, say that this restaurant is open, but only from 7 to 11. You pick up a bag and you go. There's no more full cook to order. The buffet is gone. All of those things have maybe put a bigger focus on how we can really adapt and make sure, not only, it's one thing for a hotelier to make the change, but how does it get to Hotelbeds and Agoda? How quickly is that content being picked up? So that's an interesting point, because I think that's going to continue to evolve. Requirements for masks, is it in some states, is it not? And those are things that customers are going to want to know in advance.
And we saw that also coming through in our reviews, where, obviously a lot of people would say, oh, I've got 1,000 reviews, I've got 2,000 reviews, I've got 3,000 reviews, I've got all the reviews I need. But consumers were looking for the reviews from last week only. Right? What were the people who stayed there in the last 2 weeks? What did they, I don't care what the guy said 3 months ago, it's irrelevant. I need to know the most immediate review there is, because I need to know all those things. Yeah.
And Mark, do you guys take reviews? Have you been able to kind of adapt in that way and maybe make quicker suggestions and provide customers with more updated information?
Yeah, I mean, we have north of 60,000 clients, so there was a lot of people to speak to. But what I've seen really is the level of engagement has really intensified, right? But not on the client side, but between us and the suppliers, I would say, and really trying to understand, well, where exactly is the business, and where do we have demand, and match that demand with the product and work. I think that how we're managing our time has changed significantly, because it's very, very short term. It's saying, look, we have X amount of business in this destination. We see the level of search is intensified here. It's spiking. Do we have the relevant product on the shelf? Is it priced competitively? And getting very much into the detail. Whereas I suppose a lot of the conversations that I sometimes have been involved in with our suppliers is high level, sometimes kind of, we're talking 3-year plans, whereas we were literally looking and saying, because obviously we all want to help each other in this circumstance. If we have a certain amount of business, let's shift the market share accordingly, and getting very into the details and very quickly with a lot of clients and suppliers. But I think it's gone pretty well so far, but it's just, it's incredible to see how the conversation has shifted to literally short-term opportunities, how do we transact more, because we all desperately need it. So that's the big change that I've seen as well.
And to that point, have you seen any resistance in partnership? I mean, like you said, we all want to help each other, but having been on the contracting side, we for years had a lot of tape that we had to cut through, and it took a long time, it seemed, to get to that end result of being able to put a product on the shelf. So have you seen a reduction in the ability to get things moving?
I think there's been certain cases where people don't have the the resources for obvious reasons, where there might be new rate plans were due to go live, and they were in the line from an IT perspective to go, and suddenly we've had situations where that's been put back, but then we've had to kind of look at that and understand, well, how can we utilize what we currently have and still transact. So there has been areas where things that were in the pipeline maybe have been pushed further down the line due to a lack of resource. But for the most part, I think naturally we're trying to become more automated in some of the functions that we use from a tech perspective, and what historically was quite labor manual intensive is now we're looking at different ways to be more sophisticated from a tech perspective and an operations perspective. So there's trying to see, okay, well, we can't, our customer or supplier can't do that, but how do we work around that from a tech perspective? And we're allocating a lot of resources around technology right now, just to make sure that we don't miss many opportunities. But for sure, there has been some that it's very difficult to be everything to everyone at the moment when you've less resources. I think everybody is feeling that a little bit,
Well, I think that brings up a good point, though. The thought of being agile within the construction of how rate plans are built. We've been so focused on tracking. Where did the rate derive from? Who is we wanted to know so much about the demographic of the customer checking in that I think at this point there's a little bit of throwing our hands up and saying, let's just get the customer in the door. So I think that's a good, maybe a good message to hoteliers is to remove a little bit of those restrictions, at least for now, not be so concerned about the type of customer that's checking in, but let's just get them in the door and use the existing functionality that we have and work together.
I think that you bring a good point, Natalie, but definitely in my opinion, two key success factors for the ones that are going to make it, if you will, is the collaboration, not only externally with your partners, but internally. We have seen a tremendous shift in the way that we just collaborate with each other and talk to each other, and the willingness for other areas of the company to understand a bit more about distribution and how they impact that. And the collaboration with the partners, and to both Mark and Tim's point, it's putting up our sleeves to figure out, is this working, or do we need to shift it? Do we need to do something a little bit different? And having that ability to be that transparent, to be able to make that difference. And honestly, historical data out the door. It's just historical. It's the way it used to be. Right. You're going to sit here and look at what happened at the same time last year. Go ahead, but not necessarily going to give you the solution for what you need to do tomorrow, right?
That's the point.
So kind of being able to disconnect emotionally from what your experience has taught you in the past, and just kind of sit today and think about, how do I bring my skill set and my understanding of this business to integrate it with what the consumer is looking for. And that's the challenge. And I think it needs full collaboration in, both internally and externally.
Yeah.
That's a good, yeah. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
I was going to say, just building on Gianna's point, this has been the most intimate relationship we've had with our hoteliers in ever, because we're so localized and so domestic. We literally have, market managers in New York dealing with Hamptons hotels for people coming from New York this weekend to the Hamptons. It's the most intimate. We're not doing the French coming this way or the Australians going that way, it's just the most intimate relationship, which has been fabulous. But it's also exposed a few of the challenges of being global organizations with headquarters in various places. You know, market managers needing a little bit more flexibility to talk to hoteliers and get stuff done without having to check back with Bangkok or other parts. And I think in the same with hoteliers, maybe not necessarily having to always go back to their headquarters in a different city to just check everything. I think that agility for allowing the market managers and the hotels to get together and figure out how do we solve this weekend is something we need to learn for the next phase of this.
And I think it shows an interesting codependence, which is great because we know that, you know, there was this, and we still talk about this, which is kind of jarring, and I know this will be the one we talk about, but when 9/11 happened, it was a lot different. It didn't seem as symbiotic. There was a lot of, the hotels just were desperate, like, here, we'll give you margin and we'll do whatever we need. This feels, in the way that you are all talking, much more of a partnership, which is a great way to see that the industry has shifted to, no, I don't want to work with you, or I only want brand.com. It's how do we do this together? Which is a great shift in I think what I'm just hearing from what we went through back.
Yeah, I agree, Natalie. I don't think that it's going to be a case of, oh, well, let's just drive business and it doesn't matter how, you know, like we've, like many, I suppose, have committed, you know, millions of euros in controlling distribution and trying to become that trustworthy distribution partner and bring in unique business. And I don't think just because Paris is running a 15% occupancy and London's running at 13%, that hotel chains or individual hotels are going to say, well, you know, let's just open up the taps and drive whatever you have. That's not what we're going to go back to as a business ourselves, or I don't see the segment going back there, or travel in general. I think we all have to find our unique ways of how do we bring value to our clients and suppliers. And for us, I don't think we certainly have no intention of we've spent too much money in trying to get to where we are today, which is vastly improved on where it was and still not perfect. But I think still driving the right customer is what will probably benefit us in the medium to long term, I would say, and even in the short term. I don't think we're going to go backwards. But yes,
well, and that also creates a stronger relationship with your customers who are booking. So not only the partners, the suppliers that you're working with, I think it creates a different partnership that you have with your customers because you do become that trusted partner on both sides. So Mark, I'm going to throw you another, I don't know, I'm going to give you a 500 million euro today. What are you going to do with that money, and what are you going to implement? And you're welcome.
Thanks very much. Very generous. 500 million for our business. What would
for your business?
What would we implement? I would bring. I know it might be a sensitive subject, but I would certainly bring. We have lost some talent recently, and through no fault of their own. I think we're private equity owned and we're in a good cash position, thankfully. But I'll take the 500 million. We didn't have to let many people go. We had to let some people go, and honestly, some of those individuals were very capable, and it was through no fault of their own. So first of all, I would bring those people back because I think they deserve to be brought back first and foremost. And I would invest outside of people and getting the right talent that I think that we need on top of what we've already got to come through this and be very successful. I would invest a little bit more in technology and operations. I think they're the two areas that I spoke about, automating various different things that we can still get better with. And the technology in terms of speed and accuracy and everything else can be improved on. And I think those would be the three areas that I would break it out. So people that have left us come back, bring more talent in, technology and a couple of tweaks to our operations, and I think we'd be in a great spot.
Great. Okay, Gianna, what's your thought on that? I'll give you some more.
Why does Gianna get more?
Distribution partners, that's for sure. I mean, and if I had the ability to, have dollars to impact this industry and from a distribution perspective, I would say data, transparency, and automation. So Mark, thank you that you will work on automation. We would appreciate that. I think there's, you know, what I shared earlier, we found ourselves in a position where we need to communicate to the guest information about our hotels, and it's just very, it's a heavy load, right? It's a heavy load. And I can imagine that this is unique to us. You know, it's not unique to us. It's an issue that, it's been in our industry for a while. We've talked about learning from the airlines, and granted, they are set up differently. They have different models. I get it, but we should be able to come further along, right? I think I would love to see our government tourist agencies like tourist boards and things like that be more involved, in helping us get this data and do the matchmaking, right? If they know where customers are traveling to, how they're, where they're going, what they need, whatever data they have, share it with us so that we could do a better job at bringing them to the hotels or the locations that they're looking for. So I think data, transparency across the segmentation, across the different verticals in our industry, and combined with automation is something that we all need to be thinking about today to help us elevate our business and hotels, the hotel vertical as a whole, specifically in the next couple of years. This is our chance. We got to do it. And yes, we do need to bring back resources that have been, unfortunately, not been able to sustain their positions. But hopefully, if we do it right, we'll be able to bring those folks back sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, the data is, you had said something earlier where you say, it's your data. You should be able to own it. You should be able to disseminate it. You should be able to, it's your customer, it's your guest, but how do you get that into a place where it helps the entire community, which I think is really important. Okay, so Tim, I'm going to give you half. So if money were no object, what would you do?
Look, I think Mark's answer for what I do internally is the perfect one. So I'm going to pivot my answer a little bit and think about what I do externally. Because we need a vaccine. We just need a vaccine, full stop. Yeah. With this domestic stuff is going to be good, and we're going to grow little bits in here. We'll have dips because of outbreaks, and we'll have gains because of long weekends and holidays. But this industry needs the vaccine. The long-term solution is the vaccine. So I think if I had an external dollar, I'd put it, in helping whoever is out there who's research and bio smart to get us a vaccine. I'm also conscious that, again, as much as if you sort of fly above certain markets and you see, domestic is year on year up, and that it's not evenly spread. You know that the MICE hotels, in downtown central next to the convention center are probably still closed because there's just no MICE business. You know that the inbound islands, you talked about Hawaii, we've got dozens of examples of Hawaii-like places across Southeast Asia and North Asia that were dependent on inbound. And domestic just cannot save those places. They cannot save the trekking tour operator, the scuba diving guy, the bar crawl person. They can't be helped by domestic. And so if I had money, I'd find a way to figure out a hibernation strategy for that half of the industry. Step back, recuperate, figure out to keep people somehow around so that when the vaccine is there, we have an industry to feed them with again. So my internal answers, I would just say ditto to Mark. His answers were spot on, but I would add this sort of two external factors of the inbound industry is not going to get fixed until there's a vaccine. And we as an industry and as governments and as all sorts of things have to figure out how we can help make that happen.
Yeah. You brought up the scuba diver thing, and that makes me think, our industry has been built a lot on experience within market. So we're not talking about the MICE, we're not talking about the soccer weekend, we're not talking about, that kind of a market, but for these bigger trips that, we all would prefer as hoteliers and as, as on the buyer side to have longer lengths of stay. And that's where we had a lot of that opportunity was with these small, dive operations and all of these small businesses, which let's all cross our fingers that they will still be around, because it's scary to think that, you look at something like a TripAdvisor where the reviews really are favored towards the small mom and pop kind of operations. Yeah. So then I think what, I'd like to kind of close this out a little bit and ask you guys, over the last 6 months, we probably have done a lot of internal analysis on who we are as humans and who we are as a society. Personally and or professionally, what has really hit you the most? What have you learned the most, either about yourself, our industry, or about your organization? Mark, I'll start with you. No pressure.
Okay, so what you broke up slightly towards the end. Did you say what? Can you just repeat the last part of the question?
Just whatever you've learned in the last 6 months, either personally, professionally, or from your organization.
What about, yeah, I mean, I've learned so much, but I think I personally feel grateful to still have a role and you know, genuinely, sounds a bit cliche, but thankful to have a job. I'm grateful for the business, the company that I work for. I think that they've shown a lot of support, and you figure out a lot about the company and individuals during really tough times. But I've learned a lot about the industry as a whole. I think, you know, we really have come together, you know, and I think we have a duty really to, you know, talk about positive things, get people flying again in a safe way, of course, but really working together. And you know, and I see the level of work and effort that's going into trying to people that may have left or moved out of positions and to try and get them back in. You know, us as a company, we're doing kind of 6 months work after the fact to try and bring people back or get them into positions, even in a competitor if needs be. It's you know, so you do, you know, I've learned a lot around empathy and just being, I suppose, you know, feeling fortunate for the position that we're currently in. So that's long-winded answer, but that's my that's what over the last 6 months, that's how I feel.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Gianna?
I think, you know, all of those things that Mark said for sure. And however, for me, you know, people's creativity and their ability to flex and adapt has been mind-blowing for me. You know, even within myself, just to find myself, you know, stretching out to areas or things that I didn't think, you know, I had the ability, or that, you know, just being able to do that, I think it is really has amazed me, looking around how creative we are as humans. And particularly in this industry, having been in this industry my entire career, I never, ever imagined a day like this, right? Like never, ever, where, you know, planes would be empty and just kind of stopped for a long time. But nevertheless, just to see the resilience, and you know, we're still in it and we're going to come out of it. But, and even some colleagues that haven't been so fortunate to have a job or even find another job within the industry, and seeing how they've been able to be agile enough to transfer their skills in other industries. And it's sad to see them go away to another industry, but at the same time, it's very pleasing to see that, listen, all of the years of distribution that you've done, or all of the years of technology that you've applied, you can take that and, you know, apply it in another industry, in another vertical, and be okay. You know, that's sort of encouraging as well. So I've learned a lot, and if you know, the most has been how resilient as people we are in general. That's been, you know, a great eye opener for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah. I echo that completely. I mean, you know, to still have a job in travel and to have my parents still healthy in 2020, I every day I get up and I thank the universe for that, because I know there's plenty of people who aren't as fortunate as that, and just in those two simple things. So I feel truly blessed for that. But I also, because I can see that when the humans get a chance to travel again, they go back at it as fast as they can. And so I'm long on travel, right? I believe in travel. We all do, right? In fact, I'm not sure as a booking holdings guy I should, but I'm going to quote Eric Blackford, who many of you know is the second CEO of Expedia. I saw him on a webinar recently. And he said, with great affection, mind you, he said, travel is the ultimate cockroach industry, right? It's unkillable. And he said it with a smile, and he said it with love. And I say it with a smile, and I echo his thoughts with love, that this is the ultimate industry. This is an unstoppable, amazing industry. And I feel blessed to have been part of it for 20 years or more. So yeah, it's this very human moment of feeling lucky to still have a job, lucky that my family is still healthy, and then believe in the cockroach of travel and believe in the longevity of this industry, and having seen that when consumers get a chance, they will come back, and they'll get back in planes and airplanes and cars and trails and all that sort of stuff. And they will get out there as fast as they can. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I won't keep you guys any longer. I can't genuinely express my sincere gratitude for not only taking the time, but really for the years of experience that you have to really allow the HEDNA community to have some positive outlook. We are fighters. We are incredibly passionate about this industry. We know it will come back. And I am so grateful to know that there's people like the three of you helping lead your organizations and get us back where we can all get back and start experiencing the world again. So thank you guys again so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Good morning, good night, everybody.
Be safe,
Saudi
be well.
Cap from Bangkok.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.